thunder tore through the sky over Clayton with a violence that shook the shingles of the Oak Creek Ranch main house. It was October 1947. The first rain of the season fell with fury upon the cracked Georgia earth, as if the heavens were collecting an ancient debt. Colonel Arthur Ferguson set his pen down on the ledger, lifted his tired eyes, and watched through the window as a curtain of water turned the yard into mud. The smell of wet earth invaded the house through the cracks, mixed with the aroma of stale coffee that never left the kitchen. It was nearly 10 at night when Jeb, the ranch's oldest foreman, appeared on the porch, stomping his muddy boots. Arthur had known the man for 30 years. One look at his face was enough to know something was wrong. "Colonel," Jeb said, taking off his soaked hat, water streaming down a face marked by the sun. "There's a woman at the gate." Arthur frowned, closing the ledger with a dry thud. "What woman?" "I don't know, sir. She appeared out of nowhere, soaked to the bone, begging for help. She's holding a bundle in her arms and won't let go for anything." Jeb swallowed hard. "She's talking nonsense, Colonel, like someone who's seen the devil." Arthur Ferguson was a man not easily shaken. 52 years old, broad shoulders beginning to curve under the weight of solitude. Gray hair cut short, beard always shaven. A widower since 1937, when a fever took his wife Helen and their newborn son in less than a week. He had transformed his grief into work and his silence into a fortress. He received no visitors, went to no parties, and looked at no women. Oak Creek Ranch was his world, and the fences that bound it were also the walls of his voluntary prison. "Send her away," Arthur said, turning his eyes back to the book. "I don't receive anyone at this hour." "I tried, Colonel." Jeb's voice trembled slightly. "But she said your name. Said you would want to hear what she has to say. Said it's about Miss Helen." The silence that settled in the room was heavier than the storm outside. Arthur looked up slowly. Jeb took a step back at the expression on his boss's face. No one spoke that name at Oak Creek Ranch. No one dared. "What did you say?" Arthur's voice came out low. "Dangerous. I didn't say anything, Colonel. It was her, the woman. Said she comes from far away, that she needs to speak with you about Miss Helen and about things you need to know before it's too late." Arthur stood up so abruptly, the chair scraped against the wooden floor. He grabbed the lantern and the leather coat hanging by the door. The rain was so heavy one could barely see 3 feet ahead, but he crossed the yard with long strides, Jeb running behind, until they reached the main gate of the ranch. And there she was, a woman leaning against the cedar posts, thin as a dry twig, soaked from head to toe. The dark dress clung to her skeletal frame, black hair plastered to her face, bare feet sunk in the mud. In her arms, pressed tight against her chest, a bundle of cloth that seemed to hold something heavy. Her eyes, when they met Arthur's under the trembling light of the lantern, were 2 wells of despair. "Colonel Arthur Ferguson?" The voice came out weak but firm. "Who are you?" Arthur approached, raising the lantern. "How do you know my name?" The woman swayed, and Jeb stepped forward to steady her, but she composed herself, clutching the bundle even tighter. "My name is Iris Carter. I came from Birmingham. I walked 6 days to get here." 6 days? Arthur looked at the woman's wounded feet, at the blood flowing mixed with the mud. "Woman, Birmingham is over 100 miles from here." "I know." She lifted her chin with a dignity strange for someone in that state. "I walked. I came because I have to. I came because Miss Helen asked me to." The name crossed Arthur's chest like a blade. "My wife died 10 years ago." "I know she died, Colonel." Iris took a staggering step forward. "But before she died, she made me promise one thing, She made me swear that if one day I needed it, I would come here. That you were a man of your word, that you would help me. The rain kept falling, relentless. Arthur felt something turn within him, a mixture of anger and confusion. I have never seen you in my life. Helen never mentioned your name. Because she met me in Birmingham, Colonel. In the last months of her life, when she went for treatment, Iris was shaking violently now, her lips purple from the cold. We stayed at the same boarding house. She helped me when no one else would. And before she came back here, she gave me the address of this ranch and made me promise that if hell ever came looking for me, I should run to you. Arthur stood motionless, processing it. Helen had gone to Birmingham in the last months of her pregnancy when the bleeding started. He wanted to go with her, but she insisted he stay to manage the ranch, that she would be back soon. She returned 3 months later, 8 months pregnant, thinner, paler. She died 15 days after the birth, taking the boy with her. What hell? Arthur asked, his voice hoarse. Iris looked back into the darkness of the muddy road, as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. When she turned her eyes back to Arthur, there was pure panic in them. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request. For what I did before I met him. And the child? Where is the child? Iris looked at the bundle in her arms, and for the first time since Arthur arrived at the gate, she loosened it slightly. Inside the bloodied cloth, there was a baby. A newborn boy, tiny, eyes closed, skin bluish. He was born yesterday, whispered Iris. Born on the side of the road, alone, just me and God. I cut the cord with a sharp stone, washed him in the rainwater. But he doesn't cry, Colonel. He breathes, but he doesn't cry. And I don't know what to do. Arthur stood paralyzed, looking at that tiny creature, at that boy hanging between life and death. Something broke inside him, a dam holding back 10 years of repressed pain. Jeb, take her and bring her to the house. Call Martha to bathe her and give her clean clothes. And call Hattie, the midwife. Fast. But Colonel, began Jeb. Do as I say. Arthur's voice thundered louder than the storm. Jeb obeyed immediately, supporting Iris, who could barely stand. Arthur followed behind, crossing the yard back to the house, his mind a confusion of thoughts. Why had Helen given the ranch address to this woman? What did she know? What had she seen in Iris that made her promise help? Inside the house, Martha, the 50-something cook who had worked on the ranch since Arthur's father's time, nearly fell off her chair when she saw the procession enter. Lord have mercy, Colonel. What is this? Prepare the guest room, heat water, and go get Hattie. Tell her it's urgent. Martha asked no questions. She had known the boss long enough to know when to obey in silence. 15 minutes later, Iris was wrapped in blankets, sitting near the wood stove, shivering convulsively while sipping hot chicken broth. The baby had been taken by Hattie, the village midwife, a gray-haired woman with wise hands who had brought half the children of Clayton into the world. Arthur stayed in the living room, pacing from one side to the other, the sound of his boots marking the rhythm of his restlessness. Half an hour later, Hattie appeared holding the boy wrapped in clean cloths. The boy is alive, Colonel, she said, with that direct manner that never hid the truth. But he's weak, born before his time, by the looks of it. Needs care, warmth, milk. The mother is in shock, but she'll survive. But she needs rest, food, time to heal. How much time? Asked Arthur. Weeks, maybe months. She walked too far, suffered too much. Her body is at its limit. Arthur ran a hand over his face, feeling the weight of a decision he knew would change everything. She stays here. The silence that followed was heavy. Hattie exchanged a look with Martha, who stood in the kitchen doorway. Jeb, leaning against the wall, took off his hat and turned it in his hands. "Colonel," Jeb said carefully, "the townfolk will talk. They'll say you're harboring a runaway woman. That. Let them talk." Arthur cut him off, voice dry. "She stays, and no one lays a finger on her while she is under my roof. Is that understood?" Everyone nodded in silence. That night, Arthur couldn't sleep. He stood on the porch, watching the rain begin to subside, thinking of Helen, of what she would have seen in that woman to make such a promise. Thinking of the baby who didn't cry, the bloodied bundle, the wounded feet of someone who walked 100 miles fleeing death, and thinking, for the first time in 10 years, that perhaps the isolation he chose was not protection, but cowardice. When the sun rose the next day, illuminating the countryside washed by the storm, the news had already spread through the village like fire in dry grass. Colonel Arthur Ferguson, the man who swore never to look at another woman after his wife's death, had sheltered a stranger in the dead of night. A soaked woman, with a baby of unknown father, fleeing from God knows what. The sharp tongues began to work before breakfast was even served. Mrs. Higgins, who owned the general store at the entrance of the village, was the first to spread it. "I always knew that man would fall into temptation. 10 years a widower, but a man is a man. Now he's gone and got himself a concubine, and with a bastard child to boot." Mr. Tate, the blacksmith, hammered on the anvil and commented to anyone who would listen. What kind of example is the colonel setting? A runaway woman, no husband, appearing out of nowhere, and he opens the door like she's family. It ain't right. At the market, on the corners, at the church door, the name of Arthur Ferguson and the mysterious woman was chewed up, turned over, seasoned with assumptions and judgments. Some said she was a mistress he kept hidden in Birmingham. Others, that she was a prostitute he met while traveling. The most creative invented that the baby was his son, the fruit of an old affair, now coming to collect the price. Reverend Davis, the vicar of the local parish, appeared at Oak Creek Ranch on the afternoon of the second day. He was a short man, with a prominent belly and small eyes that seemed always to be judging. He knocked on the door with the authority of someone who thinks himself God's spokesperson. "Colonel Arthur, I need to speak with you. It's about the delicate situation that has reached my ears." Arthur received the Reverend in the living room, without offering coffee. "What situation, Reverend?" "The presence of this woman in your house, Colonel. A woman without a husband, with a child, living under your roof. You understand that this generates comments?" "Comments." Arthur repeated the word, as if it were something bitter in his mouth. "The woman was dying at my gate, Reverend. Her baby was almost lifeless. Did you want me to send them away?" "I wanted you to think of your reputation, Colonel, of the reputation of Miss Helen's memory." "This woman," the Reverend lowered his voice, "they say she is married, that she ran away from her husband. That is adultery, Colonel. It is a sin." Arthur stood up slowly, eyes fixed on the preacher. "Do you know what sin is, Reverend Davis? Sin is beating a woman until she faints. Sin is burning her skin with a hot iron. Sin is threatening to kill an innocent baby. That is sin. Giving shelter to those in need. That is what you yourself teach from the pulpit every Sunday." The Reverend paled, but insisted. "You don't know this woman's story, Colonel. You don't know what she did, why her husband treats her so. Every story has two sides. Is there any side that justifies breaking a woman's arm 3 times, Reverend?" Arthur's voice was low, but sharp as a razor. "Is there any side that justifies branding her skin with a hot iron?" Reverend Davis swallowed hard, adjusted his coat, and stood up. "Do as you think best, Colonel, but know that the community is watching, and God too. I'll let God judge when the time comes. You, with all due respect, can go tend to your sheep while I tend to mine." The Reverend left sulking, and Arthur knew the situation would only get worse. But what he didn't expect was that 3 days after Iris's arrival, a man would appear at the ranch gate. A tall man, broad-shouldered, black goatee, riding a dun horse, with a shotgun across the saddle and eyes that promised violence. Silas Carter had arrived in Clayton, and he didn't come to talk. Jeb came running to the porch where Arthur was having breakfast, hat in hand, and sweat dripping down his forehead despite the morning cool. "Colonel, there's a man at the gate. Says he's the girl's husband. He's armed." Arthur placed his cup slowly on the saucer, coffee half drunk. He stood up calmly, took the gun belt hanging by the door, and strapped it to his waist. "Tell him to come in alone, and tell the hands to stay ready, but out of sight." Inside the house, Iris was in the back room with the baby. In the 3 days since she arrived, she had gained some color in her face, but was still too thin, eyes always frightened like a cornered animal. The boy, whom she called Michael, was starting to cry. A weak cry, but a cry nonetheless. Hattie said it was a good sign, that the boy was fighting to live. Silas Carter entered through the gate on horseback, shotgun clearly visible, eyes scanning everything, like someone assessing enemy territory. He was truly a big man, maybe 40 years old, with that kind of brute strength that comes from a life of hard labor and casual violence. He stopped the horse a few yards from the porch where Arthur waited, standing, arms crossed. "Are you Colonel Arthur Ferguson?" The voice was thick, loaded with an authority that didn't ask, but took. "I am. And who are you?" "Silas Carter. I came for what's mine." He spat on the ground. "My wife is here, and the bastard she carries." Arthur didn't move. "Your wife, as you say, arrived here nearly dead. The baby too. I gave them shelter because it's what any Christian would do." Silas gave a dry laugh, without humor. "Christian." He repeated the word like a joke. "A Christian who puts a married woman inside his house and locks the doors. The townfolk are already talking, Colonel. They say you're taking advantage of another man's misfortune." Arthur's hand moved slightly toward his revolver, but he restrained himself. "People say a lot of things. Most of it lies. Your wife and the child are under my protection until they are fit to decide what to do. You can leave." "Decide?" Silas tilted his head, eyes narrowing. "A married woman decides nothing, Colonel. She is mine. I bought her from her father, paid the dowry, married in the church. She's coming back with me, and the bastard too. What I do with the two of them after, that's my business. You're not taking anyone from here." Arthur's voice came out low, but there was steel in it. Silas studied the colonel for a long moment, as if measuring how far he could go. Then, slowly, he dismounted, hand brushing the stock of the shotgun. "You're making a mistake, Colonel. You're meddling in husband and wife business, and that never ends well. The business stopped being just husband and wife when you decided to brand her with a hot iron and threaten to kill a child." Arthur took a step forward. "Now it's my business too, and as long as she is under my roof, no one lays a finger on her." The two men stared at each other in silence, the air heavy with tension. It was Silas who looked away first, but not from fear, from calculation. "All right, Colonel, I'll leave, but this ain't over. I'll be back, and when I come back, I'm taking what's mine, even if I have to burn this whole ranch down." He mounted the horse with abrupt movements, pulled the reins hard, and galloped off, kicking up dust. Arthur stood on the porch for a long time after he disappeared around the bend of the road, hands still near his revolver, heart beating heavy in his chest. When he went inside, he found Iris leaning against the hallway wall, the baby pressed against her chest, eyes wide with terror. "He came. He found me." "He's gone," said Arthur, but he knew the words sounded hollow. "He'll come back." Iris was trembling. "He always comes back. And when he comes back, it's worse. I need to leave, Colonel. I need to get out of here before he hurts you, your men, everyone. You're not going anywhere, not in the state you're in." Arthur hesitated, then, for the first time since she arrived, approached slowly. "Come, sit. You need to rest." Iris let herself be led to the kitchen, where Martha was preparing lunch. The cook looked at the girl with a mixture of pity and suspicion. The village comments had reached her too, and even working on the ranch for decades, she wasn't immune to the poison of gossip. Arthur pulled up a chair and sat on the other side of the table, studying Iris carefully for the first time since she arrived. She was young, maybe 25, but looked older. The extreme thinness, the burn marks on her left arm that she tried to hide with her sleeves, the way she flinched whenever someone moved too fast. "Tell me something," he said after a moment. "How did you meet my wife?" Iris looked up, surprised. "Do you really want to know?" "I do." She took a deep breath, adjusting Michael, who slept in her arms. "I lived in Birmingham, worked at a boarding house, washing clothes, cooking. Miss Helen arrived there in early 1937. She was pregnant, needing treatment. She stayed 3 months at the boarding house. She never told me about you, because she knew you would worry." Iris smiled sadly. She was like that, always thinking of others before herself. "In the first days, she saw me getting beaten by the owner of the boarding house. He wanted me to do things I didn't want to do. Miss Helen stepped in, threatened to report him to the sheriff, defended me when no one else would." Arthur felt something tighten in his chest. It was exactly the kind of thing Helen would do. "After that, we became friends. I helped her when the pains came. She taught me to read. We spent afternoons talking, and she told me about you, about this ranch, about how she missed home." Iris wiped a tear. "She said you were the most honorable man she knew, that you kept your word, that you protected your own, that you never let anyone down." "And was that why she gave you the ranch address?" "It was. The day she left Birmingham to come back here, she called me to her room and wrote the address on a piece of paper. Said, 'Iris, if you ever need to run, if life gets too hard, you go to this place. You find my husband, Colonel Arthur Ferguson, and tell him I sent you. He will help you. I know he will.'" Iris pulled a yellowed paper from her dress pocket, folded and refolded so many times it was almost falling apart. "I kept this paper for 10 years. I thought I would never need it. But when I got pregnant, when Silas found out the child wasn't his, when he started talking about killing me, I remembered the promise." Arthur took the paper carefully. It was Helen's handwriting, without a doubt, those small, neat letters. "Oak Creek Ranch, Clayton Road, Georgia, Colonel Arthur Ferguson." And underneath, in a rushed script, "He will help. I know he will." "She died 2 weeks after coming back here," Arthur said, voice hoarse. "The baby, too." "I know. I heard months later, when an acquaintance from Birmingham passed through here and brought the news. I cried so much, Colonel." Miss Helen was the only person who had been good to me without wanting anything in return. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound being the crackling of wood in the stove and Michael's soft breathing. It was Martha who broke the moment, placing 2 plates of food on the table, stew, beans, cornbread. "Eat, child," said the cook, her tone still suspicious but less harsh. "You're too thin. A child needs a strong mother." In the days that followed, a strange routine was established at Oak Creek Ranch. Iris woke up early, before sunrise, and helped Martha in the kitchen, despite the cook's protests. "I can't sit idle, Miss Martha," she would say. "Not after everything the Colonel is doing for me." Arthur watched her from afar, trying to understand this woman, whom Helen had deemed worthy of protection. He saw the way she worked, with obsessive care, as if every task were a way to pay an unpayable debt. He also saw how she startled at sudden noises, how she shrank away when Jeb or a ranch hand passed too close, how she checked the road obsessively, waiting to see Silas appear again. At night, when the day's work ended, Arthur sat on the porch as he always did, but now he was no longer alone. Iris began to appear too, sitting in the chair beside him, Michael sleeping in her arms, and they talked. Small talk at first, about the weather, about the ranch, about nothing important. But gradually, the words became deeper, truer. "Do you miss her?" Iris asked one of those nights, the crescent moon illuminating the yard. "Every day," Arthur answered without hesitation. "But I learned to live with the lack. It's like losing an arm. You never forget it existed, but you learn to use what's left." "I never had that," Iris said softly. "I never had anyone I would miss if I lost. My mother died in childbirth. My father sold me to Silas when I was 16 to pay a gambling debt. Silas, he never loved me. Married me just because I was young, because he thought he could mold me. And when he saw I wasn't what he wanted, he started breaking me." Arthur gripped the arms of the chair, anger rising. "How did you get pregnant if the child isn't his?" Iris stayed quiet for so long, Arthur thought she wouldn't answer. When she spoke, her voice was almost a whisper. "It was a hand who worked on our land. A good man, gentle. He treated me like a person, you know? Looked at me like I was worth something. It was just once, Colonel. Only once, in a moment of weakness, of loneliness. And Michael came from that time." "And the man?" "Silas found out, killed him with 3 shots, buried him in the pasture, and never spoke of it again. But with me, he decided he would make me pay for the rest of my life." The silence that followed was heavy, loaded with things that didn't need to be said. Arthur looked at the baby in Iris's arms, an innocent boy, fruit of a moment of humanity in a hell of violence. "You know what Helen used to tell me?" Arthur said after a while. "She said we don't choose where we come from, but we choose where we go. This boy, he's not to blame for anything, and neither are you." Iris looked at him, eyes shining. "Do you really believe that, sir?" "I do." She smiled for the first time since she arrived, a small, hesitant smile, but real. And Arthur felt something move inside him, something that had been frozen for 10 years, starting to melt. But the peace was fragile. In the village, tongues remained sharp. Mrs. Higgins spread that she had seen Arthur and Iris talking on the porch, cozy like a married couple. Mr. Tate swore the Colonel was in love, that he was going to marry the runaway woman and stain the memory of Miss Helen. Reverend Davis, from high in the pulpit, delivered a sermon on the temptations of the flesh and the dangers of harboring sin. The women of the village, especially, were cruel. "That one is a gold digger," they said. Came with sweet talk and a belly and threw herself at the Colonel, who's been alone for 10 years. A lonely man is easy to fool. Others were even worse. "I bet the child is his. I bet they knew each other a long time ago and she came to collect." When Iris needed to go to the village to get medicine Michael needed, a syrup only the pharmacist had, she went accompanied by Jeb. The reception was icy. Women crossed the street not to pass near her. Men looked with that mixture of desire and contempt that is the worst kind of violence. At the pharmacy, Mr. Owen served her grudgingly, throwing the bottle of syrup on the counter with force. "That's $2, he said, eyes cold. Iris took the money Arthur had given her and placed it on the counter. But before she could take the syrup, Mrs. Pembroke, wife of the county judge, entered the pharmacy, accompanied by two friends. "Look at that," she said loudly, so everyone could hear. "The colonel's concubine doing shopping. What nerve!" Iris turned pale, but kept her head high. "Good morning, Mrs. Pembroke." "Don't give me good morning, girl. I know very well what you are. A married woman who leaves her husband, who shows up with another man's child, and still has the audacity to interfere in a widower's home. Have you no shame?" "I didn't," began Iris, but Mrs. Pembroke wouldn't let her finish. "You didn't what? Aren't married? Didn't leave your husband? Aren't living in the colonel's house as if you owned it?" "God sees everything, girl, and hell is full of women like you." Iris clutched the medicine bottle to her chest and left the pharmacy almost running, Jeb behind her. Only when she reached the buggy did she begin to cry, a silent cry of humiliation and powerlessness. When they returned to the ranch, Arthur was in the corral checking the cattle. One look at Iris's face was enough to know what happened. "What is it?" "Nothing, Colonel," she said, wiping her tears. "Just, the townfolk don't want me here." Jeb, taking off his hat, told him what happened at the pharmacy. With every word, Arthur felt the anger grow. "Tomorrow I'm going there," he said, voice dangerous. "I'm going to have a talk with Mrs. Pembroke and anyone else who thinks they can mistreat those under my protection." "No, Colonel, please." Iris grabbed his arm, the first time she touched him on purpose. "Don't do that. It will make everything worse. I'm used to judgment. I've endured it my whole life. I can endure a little more." Arthur looked at her hand on his arm, small, thin, full of work calluses. He looked into her eyes, red from crying but still strong, still fighting. And something in him yielded. "You shouldn't have to endure," he said quietly. "No one should." That night, Arthur couldn't sleep. He kept thinking of Helen, of what she would say if she were alive. Thinking of Iris, of the strength she needed to have to survive everything she survived. Thinking of the baby, Michael, who was starting to fatten up a little, to gain color, to look less like a ghost and more like a real child. Thinking that maybe, after 10 years frozen in pain, he was starting to feel something beyond emptiness. But the peace wouldn't last. 3 days after the incident at the pharmacy, Arthur woke up to the smell of smoke. He leaped from bed, pulled on his pants in a hurry, and ran outside. The barn, where all the animal feed was kept, all the corn harvest from the last season, was in flames. The flames rose high into the still dark sky, licking the wooden structure. The heat so intense it was impossible to get close. The ranch hands ran back and forth with buckets of water, but it was useless. The fire had spread too fast. It had been set with kerosene. That was obvious. Jeb arrived running, covered in soot. "It was intentional, Colonel. Found an empty kerosene can near the fence, and there are horse tracks. Someone came, set the fire, and left." Arthur didn't need to ask who. He looked at the house and saw Iris in the bedroom window, her pale face illuminated by the flames, holding Michael, eyes wide with terror. Silas Carter had sent the first message, and it was just the beginning. Dawn brought the full dimension of the destruction. The barn was just ashes and charred beams, the acrid smell of burnt wood impregnating everything. Arthur stood before the still smoking rubble, calculating the loss. 3 tons of corn, all the feed prepared for winter, the tools stored inside. But what hurt more than the material loss was knowing that this was only the start. Iris appeared beside him, Michael in her arms, face marked by a sleepless night. "I need to leave, Colonel. This was because of me. He will continue. He will destroy everything you have. He will. He won't destroy anything." Arthur cut her off, voice firm. and you are not going anywhere. This is between me and him now. But Colonel, listen, Iris. Arthur turned to her, and for the first time spoke her name deliberately, savoring the syllables. I don't retreat. I never retreated in my life. And I'm not going to start now because of a coward who sets fires in the dark. If he wants war, he'll get war. But on my terms. He turned to Jeb, who observed the conversation from a respectful distance. Jeb, double the watch. I want 2 armed men patrolling all night, rotating every 4 hours. No one enters or leaves this ranch without me knowing. And send someone to Clayton to speak with the sheriff. Yes, Colonel. Sheriff Aristides Miller arrived at noon, a thin man with a gray mustache and tired eyes of someone who has seen too much. He examined the remains of the barn, asked a few questions, wrote everything down in a battered notebook. But when Arthur accused Silas Carter directly, the sheriff grimaced. Do you have proof, Colonel? Horse tracks, kerosene can, and the man threatened to burn my ranch 3 days ago in front of my foreman. Threats aren't crimes, Colonel, and horse tracks and a kerosene can don't prove anything. Could be anyone. You have enemies. You know how it is. Arthur clenched his fists. So you won't do anything? I'll investigate, but without concrete proof, I can't arrest anyone. And between us, the sheriff lowered his voice. You are harboring the man's wife. In the eyes of the law, she still belongs to him. You are getting into a complicated situation, Colonel. My advice? Let the woman go. Let her resolve her problem with her husband, and everyone goes their own way. She will die if she goes back to him. Could be. But that is a matter between husband and wife, Colonel. The law is clear. The sheriff put away the notebook. I do what I can, but you need to understand the position you're in. The town is talking, the church is talking, even the judge is watching. Careful not to become the villain of this story. After the sheriff left, Arthur stood on the porch, smoking a cigarette he hadn't smoked in years, trying to control his rage. A law that should protect Iris was the same law that chained her to the man who wanted to kill her. And he, for trying to do the right thing, was being painted as the transgressor. Martha brought coffee, placed the cup on the small table beside him. Colonel, can I say something? Speak. I was wrong about the girl. The cook looked at her own hands, calloused from so much work. In the beginning, I thought she was a gold digger, that she was fooling you. But these days, working with her in the kitchen, talking, she's a good person, Colonel. Suffered too much. And the way she cares for the boy, the love she has for that child. Martha wiped a tear. She reminds me of Miss Helen, the same heart. Arthur looked at the cook, surprised. Martha never spoke of feelings, never opened up like that. The people can say what they want, Colonel, but you are doing the right thing. I am sure Miss Helen, up above, is proud. That afternoon, Arthur found Iris in the backyard, sitting under the old oak tree, nursing Michael. The scene had something sacred about it. Light filtered through the leaves. The baby nursing peacefully, her face serene for the first time since she arrived. He hesitated, not wanting to break that moment, but she saw him and smiled. You can come, Colonel. Don't need to stand there. Arthur approached, sat on the thick root of the tree. Keeping a respectful distance, they sat in silence for a while, watching Michael nurse, little eyes closed, tiny hand clutching his mother's finger. He's growing, said Arthur. He is, thanks to you, thanks to God and to you. Iris adjusted the baby, covering her breast with her shawl. If not for here, we would be dead, both of us. Helen would want me to help. She was always like that, heart bigger than her body. You loved her very much, didn't you? I did. Arthur picked up a twig, started drawing circles in the dirt. But I never said it enough. Always thought I had time, that she would always be there. And when I realized, she was gone. I never had that, Iris said softly. I never had anyone who truly loved me. My father saw me as merchandise. Silas saw me as property. The only man who treated me like a person. I barely knew. It was just a moment, one night, and then he died. Michael's father. Yes, I don't even know his name properly. He was just John, the hand. But he looked at me like I was beautiful, you know? Like I was worth something. And that night, under the stars, I felt free. For the first and only time in my life, I felt free. She looked at her son, and Michael came. My punishment and my salvation. It's not punishment, said Arthur firmly. That boy is a blessing. Anyone who looks at him and sees punishment isn't looking right. Iris looked up, and there was something in her eyes Arthur couldn't decipher. Gratitude? Yes, but also something else, something deeper and more frightening. Why are you doing this, Colonel? Why are you risking everything for me? Arthur stayed quiet, searching for the right words. Because when I look at you, I see someone who is fighting. I see someone who didn't give up, even when it would be easier to give up. And I spent 10 years given up, Iris. 10 years buried in pain, without truly living. Maybe helping you is my way of coming back to life. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Michael released the breast, satisfied, and began to doze. Iris nestled him against her shoulder, making the gentle circular motions that calm babies. You know people will keep talking, right? She said. That it will get worse, not better. I know. And you know Silas won't stop. That he will try again and again until he gets what he wants. I know that too. Iris stared at him, eyes shining. Then why don't you send me away? It would be easier for everyone. Because easy isn't always right. Arthur stood up, brushed the dirt from his pants, and because I made a promise, to Helen, to you, to myself, and I don't break promises. That night, the ranch was tense as a fiddle string. The hands patrolled armed. The shadows seemed darker. Every noise was a potential threat. Arthur barely slept, waking every hour, hand on the revolver, waiting for the next attack. But it wasn't fire that came. It was something worse. The next morning, when Jeb went to check the cattle in the north pasture, he found 5 heads slaughtered, dead with a shot to the forehead, without reason, without purpose other than to cause pain. It was prize stock, expensive breeders Arthur had brought from Kentucky years ago. The loss was immense, but the message was clear. Silas was escalating the violence. Son of a bitch, spat Jeb, taking off his hat before the dead animals. This here is pure evil, Colonel. There's no other word. Arthur observed the slaughtered cattle, rage boiling inside. Bury them, and reinforce the watch even more. He is testing how far he can go. Colonel, with all respect, how long are you going to take this? The man is declaring open war. Sooner or later he's going to come for the house. And then I'll be waiting. Arthur turned to face the foreman. And Jeb, if he really comes, if it gets to that point, I need you to take Iris and the boy out of here. Take them to your sisters in Atlanta. Hide them until this passes. Promise me. Jeb swallowed hard, but nodded. I promise, Colonel. When Iris heard about the dead cattle, she went pale as wax. She locked herself in the room with Michael and didn't come out all day. At night, when Arthur knocked on the door concerned, she finally opened. Her face was swollen from crying. This has to stop, Colonel. It has to stop before someone dies for real. No one is going to die. Yes, they will. Silas is capable of anything. He has killed before. Killed John. Killed a hand who tried to defend me once. Even killed a dog I had just because I liked it. She grabbed Arthur's arm, desperate. "I don't want you to be the next. I can't take any more death because of me." Arthur held her hands, so small, so cold. "Look at me, Iris. Look." She raised her frightened eyes. "I already died once, when I buried Helen and my son. These 10 years, I was just breathing, not living. If I have to risk this dead life to do one right thing, then so be it. At least it will have been worth something." "Don't talk like that." Her voice broke. "Please, don't talk like that." They stood like that, in the dark hallway, hands intertwined, the baby sleeping in the back room. And it was in that moment, in that quietness loaded with fear and hope, that Arthur understood he was falling in love with her. Not in the lightning way he had fallen for Helen at 20, but in a different way, deeper, more painful, born of shared pain and fighting side by side. And that terrified him more than any threat from Silas. 3 nights later, the moon was full when Arthur woke to the sound of breaking glass. He leaped from bed, grabbed the revolver, and ran to the hall. The living room window had been shattered, and amidst the shards, a rock wrapped in paper. Jeb and 2 hands came running, guns drawn. "Colonel, it's okay. See if you can catch who did this." While the men went out, Arthur picked up the paper tied to the rock. It was a note, written in crooked letters, every word dripping threat. "Colonel, you have until Friday to send my wife back. Friday night, I come to get her. And if she ain't here, I burn everything. The house, the cattle, the people, everything. And then I kill you, Silas." Friday, 2 days away. Iris appeared at the bedroom door, Michael in her lap, eyes wide. "What happened?" Arthur crumpled the paper in his hand. "Nothing. Go back to your room." "I heard the glass break." "What happened, Colonel?" "Go back to your room." His voice came out louder than intended, loaded with fear disguised as anger. Iris recoiled, frightened, and Arthur immediately regretted it. He took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to shout. Just go back to the room, please. Let me handle this." But it was too late. Iris had seen the paper in his hand, had seen the expression on his face. She entered the room, placed Michael on the sofa, wrapped in blankets, and snatched the paper from Arthur's hand. She read it once, twice. The color fled her face. "Friday," she whispered. "He comes on Friday. He won't get anywhere near here. Enough!" Her voice exploded, surprising both of them. "Enough lies, Colonel. Enough pretending this will end well. He will come, he will destroy everything, and he might even kill you. And all for what? Because of me. Because of a woman you barely know. It's not just for you." The words came out before Arthur could hold them back. "It's for me too, because these days with you here, seeing you fight, seeing you be a mother, seeing you smile even with everything you went through, it was the first time in 10 years I felt truly alive." The silence that fell was absolute. Iris stared at him, eyes wide, breathing fast. Michael began to whimper on the sofa, but neither of them moved. "Colonel," she said finally, voice trembling, "you cannot say these things." "Why not?" "Because I am a married woman. Because I am marked, broken, dirty. Because I cannot—" Her voice broke. "I cannot let you sacrifice yourself for me. I cannot let Miss Helen up above see her husband fall in love with a woman like me." "Helen would understand." Arthur took a step toward her. "She was the one who sent you here, remember? She knew the kind of person you are, the kind of person I needed to find." "No." Iris shook her head, tears flowing. "No, Colonel, this is madness. You are confusing gratitude with something else, confusing pity with love, and I cannot accept this." She grabbed Michael from the sofa and ran to the room, slamming the door. Arthur stood in the living room, surrounded by shards of glass, holding a threat note, heart beating out of rhythm. On Thursday morning, Arthur called Jeb. "Prepare the buggy. You are taking Iris and the boy to Atlanta today." Did she agree? She will have to agree. But when Arthur entered her room, he found the bed empty. He searched the whole house, shouting her name, panic rising. It was Martha who found the note in the kitchen, written on the back of a recipe. With the neat handwriting Iris had learned from Helen. "Colonel Arthur, forgive me for running like this, but I cannot let you risk anything else. I am going back to Silas. I will do what he wants. It is the right way. It is the way to protect you and everyone here. Thank you for everything. Miss Helen was right about you. You are the most honorable man I have met. May God bless you, Iris." Arthur crumpled the paper, rage and fear exploding together. Jeb. "Saddle my horse. Now!" "Colonel, what?" "She ran. She went back to Silas." Jeb went pale. "When?" "I don't know. Before dawn, probably. We need to find her before she gets there, before it's too late." They rode like madmen down the Birmingham road, Arthur in front, Jeb and two hands behind. The sun was already high when they spotted a small figure on the side of the road, walking slowly, a bundle in her arms. "Iris!" She turned, face soaked with tears and sweat, feet bleeding again. When she saw Arthur dismounting, she shook her head. "No, Colonel, don't take me back. Please, this is the only way to—" Arthur didn't let her finish. He grabbed her in his arms, Michael and all, and hugged her with a force that surprised them both. "Are you crazy? Did you think I would let you go back there? Did you think after everything I would simply give up? But you could die, and you will die for sure if you go back." Arthur pulled away just enough to look into her eyes. "Listen to what I'm going to say, and listen well. I already lived 10 years dead, 10 years feeling nothing, wanting nothing. You arrived here and changed everything. And if I have to choose between going back to that emptiness or fighting for you, for this boy, for this chance to live again, I choose to fight, every time, always." Iris was sobbing now, body trembling. "I don't want you to die for me, and I don't want you to die for me." He rested his forehead against hers, careful with the baby between them. "So we both will live, together, and we will face whatever comes, together." "Colonel," her voice was just a whisper. "Arthur," he corrected. "Call me Arthur." She looked up, surprised, and for the first time, smiled for real. A smile that lit up the face marked by suffering. "Arthur." They went back to the ranch together, riding slowly, Iris mounted in front of him, protected by his arms, Michael sleeping between them. And when they arrived, when they crossed the gate of Oak Creek Ranch, Arthur knew, whatever came that Friday, he was ready. Because finally, after 10 years, he had something worth fighting for. Friday night arrived with a heavy silence. Arthur had put Iris and Michael in the safest room of the house, locked from the inside. He positioned 6 armed hands at strategic points. He himself stood on the porch, revolver in holster, shotgun within reach, waiting. The moon was rising on the horizon when the sound of hooves approached. Not one horse, several, at least 5 or 6 men, Arthur estimated by the sound. Silas Carter appeared at the gate, mounted on the dun horse. But this time, he wasn't alone. He had brought 4 men with him, thugs with grim faces, all armed. "Colonel Arthur," Silas's voice echoed in the night. "I came for what's mine. Send the woman out, or I come in there and take her by force." Arthur took a step forward on the porch, the lantern light illuminating his face. "You won't set foot on this ranch, Silas. You can turn around and disappear. Last chance, Colonel. Send her out." "No. Silas made a signal, and one of the thugs fired a shot into the air. The boom tore the night. "Next shot goes in your head, Colonel." That was when a voice appeared behind Arthur, a female voice, firm, one he didn't expect. "Silas!" Iris had come out of the room, despite orders, and now stood on the porch beside Arthur, Michael in her arms. Before he could stop her, she shouted, "I have something to show you, Silas. Something that will change everything." "Iris, what are you doing?" whispered Arthur. "Trust me," she whispered back. And then, louder, "Silas, do you want to know the truth about Michael? About who his father is?" "I know, and I have proof." There was a moment of hesitation. Then Silas dismounted slowly. "What proof?" Iris went into the house and returned seconds later, holding something in her hands, a yellowed, old envelope. "This here, a letter. The last letter John wrote before you killed him. And do you know what's in this letter, Silas? Do you know what he told?" "What letter is that?" Silas's voice had lost a bit of confidence. "The letter where he tells the truth." Iris walked down the porch steps, Arthur behind her, tense. The truth you never knew. The truth that explains everything. She opened the envelope with trembling hands and began to read, voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Silas Carter, if you are reading this, it is because I am already dead, and you probably think it was you who killed me. But I need you to know one thing before I go. Michael is not my son. Michael is your son, Silas. Your blood son." The silence was deafening. Silas stood paralyzed. Iris continued reading, voice trembling. "Iris never betrayed you, Silas. She got pregnant by you, one of the times you forced her, too drunk to remember the next day. She told me everything, crying, desperate. And I, who liked her, who wanted to protect her, invented that the son was mine. Invented it to make you stop beating her during the pregnancy. Thought if you thought she had betrayed you, you would stop caring, would leave her alone. But I was wrong. You got even worse. And now I will die knowing I failed. Michael is your son, Silas. Your blood. And if you kill this child, you will be killing the only good thing you could leave in this world. May God forgive you, because I can't. John Smith." Iris folded the letter slowly. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice was firm. "I always knew the truth, Silas. Always knew Michael was yours. But you were so convinced I had betrayed you, so full of hate, you didn't even notice. John lied to protect me, died to protect me. And you killed him thinking you were killing my lover, when actually you were killing the only good man who tried to save me from you." Silas staggered, face white as wax. "That's a lie. Has to be a lie. Count the weeks, Silas. Count from that night in June, when you came home drunk from Mr. Anthony's party. Count to the day Michael was born. 9 months exactly. And look at his face." Iris lifted the baby to the lantern light. "Look closely. He has your eyes, your nose. He's your son." Silas took a step forward, then another, eyes fixed on the baby. And for the first time since he appeared, his expression was not of anger. It was of confusion, of pain, of something that could be remorse. I spent all these months wanting to kill my own son?" "You did," said Iris, voice breaking. "And spent 9 years destroying me when I never betrayed you. Never, Silas. No matter how much you beat me, burned me, humiliated me, I never betrayed you." Silas fell to his knees in the dirt, hands covering his face. One of the thugs took a step forward, confused, not knowing what to do. Another dropped his weapon, shocked. Arthur watched everything, tense, hands still on his revolver. He didn't trust that sudden change, didn't believe years of violence could be erased by a revelation. And he was right, because when Silas lifted his face, there were tears there. But there was also something darker, more dangerous. If he is my son, then you are mine, Iris, both of you. And you are coming back with me, now. They are not. Arthur stepped forward, placing himself between Silas and Iris. It's over, Silas. You heard the truth. Now go away and leave them alone. Leave alone? Silas laughed, a laugh without joy, without life. After everything I did? After finding out I spent years torturing an innocent woman? That I almost killed my own son? Do you think I can live with that? Do you think I will simply walk away and pretend none of this happened? He stood up, hand going to the revolver at his waist. If I can't have them, no one will. Better dead than away from me. Silas, no, screamed Iris. But it was too late. Silas drew the revolver, and everything happened in a fraction of a second. Arthur pushed Iris and Michael to the side, protecting them with his body. Silas's shot burst in the night, and Arthur felt the impact in his shoulder, pain exploding, the warmth of blood. But before Silas could shoot again, 3 shots echoed simultaneously. Jeb and 2 hands fired from their positions. Silas was hit in the chest, arm, leg. He fell backward into the dirt, revolver slipping from his hand. His thugs, seeing the boss down, hesitated. Then, one by one, turned around and galloped away, abandoning him. Iris ran to Arthur, who had fallen to his knees, hand clutching the bleeding shoulder. Arthur, look at me. I'm fine, he gasped. Just the shoulder, I'm fine. Silas, fallen in the dirt a few yards away, coughed blood. Jeb and the hands approached, weapons still drawn, but Arthur signaled for them to back off. With difficulty, he dragged himself to where Silas was. The man was agonizing, eyes glazed on the starry sky. When he saw Arthur, he tried to speak, voice coming out in gurgles. I killed my own son, almost. But you didn't, said Arthur. He is alive. He will grow. He will be a good man, better than you. Silas coughed more blood. Take care of him and her, please. Those were his last words. Silas Carter died there on the dirt of Oak Creek Ranch, under the Georgia stars, carrying the weight of 9 years of violence and 1 minute of incomplete redemption. Iris didn't cry. She stood still, holding Michael, looking at the body of the man who had been her torment for so long. Only when Martha wrapped her in a hug did she collapse, sobbing, not from sadness, but from relief, from liberation. Arthur was taken inside, Hattie tending to the wound while he grunted in pain. The bullet had passed through the shoulder, clean, missing the bone. It would hurt for weeks, but would heal. You are crazy, Colonel, muttered Hattie while stitching. Could have died. But I didn't. He looked at Iris, who was sitting in the chair beside him, Michael sleeping in her arms. And it was worth it. Sheriff Miller came the next day, examined the scene, heard the statements. He read John Smith's letter 3 times. In the end, he closed the notebook and looked at Arthur. Self-defense. Silas shot first, had threatened before, 4 witnesses. You're clear, Colonel. And the woman? Well, she's a widow now. Free. Free. The word echoed in the room like a bell. Iris was free, and for the first time in 9 years, she could breathe without fear. 3 months later, Oak Creek Ranch woke to the smell of fresh bread coming from the kitchen. Iris had woken before the sun, as she did every morning now, and prepared coffee the way Martha had taught. Strong, cloth-strained, sweet, just right. Michael slept in the crib Jeb had built, a cedar wood crib with star carvings on the sides. Arthur's shoulder had healed well, leaving a scar he touched sometimes, distracted, remembering that night. The scar was a physical reminder of when everything changed, when he stopped merely existing and started truly living. Silas's body had been buried in the Clayton Cemetery, in a grave without a name, without tears, without flowers. No one claimed his presence. No one missed him. It was as if he had been merely a shadow that finally dissolved in the daylight. But his shadow still haunted sometimes. Iris woke in the middle of the night with nightmares, body drenched in sweat, thinking she heard his voice. Arthur found her sitting on the porch on those nights, trembling, and sat beside her without saying anything. Just stayed there, a solid and safe presence, until she could breathe again. "It will pass," he would say always. "With time, it will pass." "How do you know?" "Because I went through it. When Helen died, I woke up every night thinking I would find her in the kitchen. Took years until I stopped looking for her in every room." He looked at the dark horizon. "The pain doesn't go away, Iris, but it changes, gets different, lighter. And one day you wake up and realize you managed to sleep the whole night." The village took longer to change than they did. Tongues remained sharp for weeks, now saying Iris had killed her husband on purpose, that she had set it all up, that she had seduced the colonel for it. Mrs. Higgins swore it had been planned from the beginning. Reverend Davis preached another sermon on the dangers of lust and lies. But there were also those who changed their minds. Mr. Tate, the blacksmith, was one of them. He appeared at the ranch one afternoon, hat in hand, apologizing. "I judged wrong, Colonel. The girl suffered too much, and you did what was right. I ask forgiveness." Had he spread the truth through the town, that Silas had branded Iris with a hot iron, that he had broken her bones, that he had threatened to kill his own son? The women, especially the older ones, who had seen violent husbands in their own families, began to understand. They began to see Iris not as the woman who had destroyed a marriage, but as the woman who had survived hell. Mrs. Pembroke, the judge's wife, was the last to yield. She appeared at the ranch 6 weeks after the shootout, bringing a blue linen dress that had been hers when she was younger. "For the girl," she said, extending the package to Iris at the kitchen door. "To wear when going to town, if she wants to go to town." Iris took the dress with trembling hands. "Thank you, Mrs. Pembroke." The older woman hesitated, then spoke low. "My first husband beat me too. Broke my rib twice before dying of typhus. I know what it's like. I should have understood sooner. Forgive me." The two women hugged on the threshold, and Arthur, watching from the porch, felt something adjust inside him, as if the world was finally returning to its axis. Michael grew fast. At 4 months, he was already smiling, a toothless and drooling smile that melted even Jeb. The boy had Silas's bark eyes, but the sweet expression was all Iris. He learned to recognize Arthur, extending his little arms when he came close, making those noises babies make when they are happy. "He likes you," said Iris one afternoon, watching Arthur bounce Michael on his lap. "I like him too." Arthur made a funny face and the baby laughed. "He's a good boy. He needs a father." The words came out softly, almost a whisper. Arthur lifted his eyes to her, heart racing. "Iris, no, let me speak." She approached, sat beside him on the porch. "These 3 months here, seeing the way you take care of us, protect us, the way you look at Michael as if he were yours." She wiped a tear. "I know it's still early. I know folks will talk. But I wanted you to know that I... She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Arthur understood. He placed Michael carefully in the crib they had brought to the porch and turned to Iris. He took her hand, so small, so calloused from work, but now without the tremors of fear she had before. "Me too," he said simply. Me too, Iris. They sat like that, side by side on the porch, watching the sun set on the orange Georgia horizon, Michael dozing peacefully between them. They didn't kiss. It was still too soon. Grief was still recent. Wounds were still healing. But they were together. And it was enough. 6 months after the shootout, in April 1948, Arthur asked Iris for a walk. They went to the old oak tree in the backyard, the same place where they had talked that afternoon, so long ago, when everything was still fear and uncertainty. The tree was lush, casting a wide shade. Arthur had in his hands a small wooden box, hand-carved. "What is this?" asked Iris. "Open it." Inside the box were 2 simple gold rings. Nothing extravagant, but solid, well-made. Arthur took one of them, turned it between his fingers, searching for the right words. "When Helen died, I swore I would never love anyone again, that I would spend the rest of my life alone, tending this ranch, and that it would be enough." He lifted his eyes to Iris. "I was wrong. Alone isn't living. It's just existing. You taught me that. You and Michael. You taught me that you can start over, that you can build a new life, even when everything seems lost." Iris had tears streaming down her face, but said nothing, letting him continue. "I know it's still early. I know folks will talk, but I don't care what folks say anymore. I care about what I feel, and I feel you are my new beginning, Iris. You and Michael. You are my second chance to be happy, to be a family." He knelt in the dirt, holding her hand. "Marry me. Let me be a husband to you and a father to Michael. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that not every man is like Silas, that love doesn't have to hurt, that it can be good." Iris fell to her knees too, sobbing now, hands trembling. "Yes, yes, Arthur. 1,000 times yes." He put the ring on her finger, a little loose, would need adjusting, but she didn't want to take it off for a second. They hugged there, under the oak tree, while Michael played in the grass a few yards away, trying to catch a yellow butterfly. They married a month later, in a small ceremony at the ranch. Reverend Davis, swallowing his pride, celebrated the union. Arthur had made it clear that if he refused, they would bring a preacher from another parish. The makeshift chapel in the yard was decorated with wildflowers the women of the village had picked. Martha cried the whole time. Jeb served as best man, proud in a borrowed suit. Iris wore the blue dress Mrs. Pembroke had given, adjusted by Martha, with white lace on the sleeves. She was still thin, but not skeletal like before. Had color in her face, shine in her eyes. Looked 10 years younger. When Arthur saw her entering the yard, his heart beat like it hadn't since the first time he saw Helen. But it was different. Not that lightning passion of youth, but something deeper. Something built brick by brick, in porch conversations, in mutual care, in shared scars. "I, Iris Carter, take you, Arthur Ferguson, as my husband." Her voice was firm, had no fear, had no doubt. "To love and cherish, in joy and sorrow, in sickness and health, until death do us part." When they kissed, sealing the union, the whole village applauded. Even those who had spoken ill, even those who had judged, applauded. Because in the end, everyone recognized a story of redemption when they saw one. The party lasted until dawn. Jeb played the fiddle, the hands danced. Martha made enough food to feed an army. Michael, now 8 months old, stayed in Hattie's lap all night, watching everything with those wide, dark eyes, as if he knew that was a special day. When everyone left and the house finally went quiet, Arthur and Iris sat on the porch, now as husband and wife. Michael slept in their room, in the crib beside the bed. "Can you believe it?" Iris asked, leaning her head on his shoulder. "A year ago, I was running in the rain, thinking I was going to die. And now I'm here, married, free. Happy." "I believe it," said Arthur, kissing the top of her head. "Because you fought, because you didn't give up, because you were strong enough to endure until you got here. I only managed because you helped me, if not for you that night at the gate. But it was, and you are here, and we're going to be fine, the three of us." They stayed like that until the sun rose, watching the stars disappear, one by one, in the brightening sky. A new life was beginning, built on the ashes of the old one, but different. Better. The years passed as they do in the country. Slowly, marked by seasons, harvests, cycles of the land. Michael grew strong and healthy. At 3, he was already following Arthur around the corral, imitating his walk, his way of speaking. He called Arthur Dad without anyone teaching him. It had been natural, instinctive. "Dad, look!" he would shout, pointing at a calf born at dawn. And Arthur felt his chest tighten every time, because that word, Dad, was something he thought he would never hear again. Iris blossomed too, gained weight, gained color, gained a voice. Learned to read better with Arthur on rainy afternoons, sitting in the kitchen while Michael slept. Started helping keep the ranch books, discovering she had a knack for numbers. The women of the village now treated her as one of them, invited her to prayer circles, to help with church fairs, to be part of the world. One day, 3 years after the wedding, Iris discovered she was pregnant again. She was afraid the past would return, that something would go wrong. But Arthur held her hands and promised he would be there every step of the way. And he was. When Arthur Ferguson Jr. was born in December 1951, fat and screaming with lungs like a bull, Arthur cried. Cried for everything he had lost, for everything he had found, for all the second chances life had given. Michael, now 4 years old, looked at his little brother with curiosity. "Is he my real brother?" "He is, my son," said Iris. "For real." "Then I'm going to take care of him. I'm going to teach him everything Dad taught me." And he did. Michael grew up being the protective brother, the one who taught Arthur Jr. to walk, to ride, to handle cattle. The two were inseparable. One dark and heritage of the biological father Michael never really knew. The other fair, with Arthur's blue eyes. But no one saw a difference. They were brothers. They were family. Arthur died at 78, in the winter of 1973. In the bed he had shared with 2 women he loved, in different but equally deep ways. Iris was beside him, holding his hand. White hair in a bun, face marked by age, but still beautiful. "Was it worth it?" she whispered. "Every second," he replied, voice weak but firm. "Every scar, every fight, it was worth it." Michael and Arthur Jr. were at the door, grown men now, with their own families. 7 grandchildren ran in the yard outside, loud and joyful voices echoing through the ranch that now belonged to them. When Arthur closed his eyes for the last time, it was with a smile on his lips. He had lived 2 complete lives, a short one with Helen, full of promises, another long one with Iris, full of new beginnings, and both had been worth it. They buried him beside Helen in the Clayton Cemetery, but Iris had no jealousy of the dead. She knew she had her place in his heart, just as Helen had hers. Love isn't a competition, it is expansion. Iris lived another 17 years, watching grandchildren grow, watching the ranch prosper. Never married again. Didn't need to. She had had her great love, her great story, and it had been enough. When she died at 62 in 1990, peaceful in her sleep, she was buried on the other side of Arthur. The three together now: Helen, Arthur, Iris. The past, the present, and the future they built together. On Iris's tombstone, Michael had engraved, "Iris Ferguson, mother, wife, survivor. She fought, she won, she loved." And underneath, in smaller letters, Arthur Jr. chose, "Some stories start in darkness, but end in light." Oak Creek Ranch continues to this day, managed by the great-grandchildren of Arthur and Iris. The house was renovated, the barn rebuilt, but the old oak tree is still there. And on the porch, 2 rocking chairs remain side by side. No one moves them, no one touches them, because some things are sacred, because some stories deserve to be remembered. Because in the rural South, where the sky is wider and the stars closer, they still tell of Colonel Arthur Ferguson and the woman who appeared soaked at the gate. The woman he saved, who saved him back, who proved that starting over isn't cowardice, it's courage. And on stormy nights, when the wind rocks the empty chairs on the porch, the ranch residents swear they can hear voices. One deep, one soft, talking quietly, laughing, alive in memory that not even death can erase. Because true love doesn't die. It just transforms, spreads, multiplies in the generations that come after, in the stories that are told, in the lessons learned. And the lesson of Oak Creek Ranch is simple. It is never too late to start over. It is never too late to choose love over fear. It is never too late to do the right thing, even when it is hard. Because in the end, what remains are not the scars we carry. It is the way we learned to turn them into strength. If you are reading this, think, in your town, how many stories like this are hidden? How many women like Iris had to fight alone? How many men like Arthur chose courage instead of indifference?